Well, I'm the oldest grandchild. I was born in 1946, so I'm sort of the boss of all the grandchildren. I think they would agree with that. I'm pretty sure they would. And so my memories are not as clear as some of my siblings and my cousins, but I have some that are really, really clear. I think the memory that I have that makes me the happiest, and I knew it was going to make me happy when it happened, and it happened more than once, and I saved it in my mind so I would have it forever, is waking up early in the morning and with my grandpa, with my bumpa, and to go out to milk the cows, and the sun would just be coming up, and that was always a magical time when the sun first came up, because for some reason I didn't get up that early that often. We didn't have daylight savings time back then. So I'd get up early in the morning with Bumpa, and we'd walk out to the cows. And what I remember about Bumpa is the sun was coming up, and it was still chilly. The meadowlarks were singing, and Bumpa would be humming, and the milk bucket would be sort of clanging against his leg. And I remember thinking to myself, I'll never be this happy again. And in many ways, that was probably true. It was the happiest time I think I've ever remembered, and it sustains me into my adulthood thinking about that time. I think because we were all new to the world was new to us, and we had nothing but hope for the future. Another memory I have that I made on purpose in my mind is I was in the dining room at our grandparents' house, and our Bumpa was laying in his Naugahyde recliner, and he was asleep. And the lamplight was shining on him. He had his glasses perched on the back of his head. His mouth was kind of open. He had the Daily Sentinel spread across his lap. And I thought, I need to remember this picture because I won't have it forever. So I stood and I looked at it, and I made a permanent image in my mind. And so every day I can look at my Bumpa sleeping in his chair with his glasses on top of his head, and it gives me perfect peace to see that. It's a wonderful memory. I'm so glad I have it. I wish I could print it out for everybody so they could see it too, but they probably have a memory sort of like that. I have lots of memories about my cousins. That my cousins were so much fun because in a way we have lots of friends as we get older, but you never have a cousin again. Your cousins you can do lots of crazy things with. You can get on a horse and take a gun, which I don't know how we got away with that, and go hang out with and do things, but you could punch your cousin. You could actually sock your cousin. And they normally wouldn't sock you back because the cousin you were socking is normally a boy cousin. So even if they wanted to sock you back, they wouldn't, which was nice. I probably have a lot of the same memories that my cousins and my siblings have. I remember just being perfectly at peace at my grandparents' house, playing cards with my nanny and Bumpa, playing canasta. The fireplace was going. Bumpa wasn't working out in the fields because it was snowing. He couldn't go out. And just feeling completely safe, sleeping in the cold room with my little sister, seeing the ivy against the windows, the sun going down, and hearing the crickets, and feeling completely at peace. I don't think I ever felt sad or anxious at my grandparents' house. And as we get older, lots of kids don't have what we had. We had this sort of perfect sanctuary. And I'm so thankful I had that, and I wish that my own children had it. They didn't have a nanny and a Bumpa. They had a wonderful grandpa who still loves them, but we didn't have a farm to go to. So that's what I wanted to say.
Well, my earliest memories on the farm were we lived in a little one-room house, Mama and Daddy and Trudy and I. That was later the hired men's house, or I guess it was at that time too. Daddy considered himself a hired man. And I remember waking up and looking at, Mom had painted little flowers on the cupboards, and I remember waking up in the crib and seeing those pretty flowers and thinking that we lived in a beautiful house, our little one-room house with no water and outside facilities. And later on, we moved to a bigger house, a little bit farther away from Nanny and Bumpa, and but we still spent all our time at Nanny and Bumpa's as much as we possibly could. And when I finally went to school with Trudy at New Liberty School, I would watch for the secretary to come in and talk to the teacher, and usually it meant that we could go home to Nanny and Bumpa's house rather than going home to our house, which was a nice house, but we had two little sisters that took up all our time, and we could just roam free at Nanny and Bumpa's. And those times on the farm were so comforting, and the love was so beyond anything that I've seen kids actually experience in my time as a teacher, and the closeness of our family, and the love that Nanny and Papa gave us was so incredible. And we were really sad later on to move away from our little conclave in New Liberty and go to Grand Junction. But whenever we could, we'd come back and visit Nanny and Bumpa, and it got so that Mom would get a little bit jealous of us saying, is it time for us to go see Nanny and Bumpa? Have they called yet? Can we call them? And I just saw that little twinge of jealousy in Mom's eyes when she would think that that was our most exciting times, which were our more exciting times. And even when I was in high school, I would bring my girlfriends and boyfriends out to the farm, and I thought it was paradise. I thought we had the biggest house in the world out there, even though, looking at it now, it was not any bigger than our house that we lived in at the time, but I thought it was a mansion, and I thought that it was magical out there, and it really was. Bumpa, when we were little girls, and we would beg the night before to go to get up and feed the lambs with him, he would yell down, come, 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 come. And that meant we were to wake up and be, out in the yard in just a few minutes. And there he'd be jangling his lantern, and it would be dark, and he'd already had warmed the bottles, and we'd had the warm bottles and the nipples, and when we were really little, it was hard to hold those when the lambs got a little bit bigger, to hold those lambs at bay, because they would pull as hard on the other end of the nipple as we'd be pulling on the bottle side, and they would topple us, but it was all so much fun. And all those mornings with Bumpa saying, come on, come on, come on. And, and then Nanny would have us help do chores around inside the house, and she'd always be singing, always humming and singing, and it didn't seem like chores. It always seemed like, just time spent with Nanny was so important, and it didn't, I never thought of it as work. Those shiny parquet floors and her beautiful furniture, and we just loved being out there. And even Nanny came to see me when she was bowling later on, when I was first married and lived in Boulder, and I introduced her to my friends, and by that time Bumpa had died, but my friends just adored her. She was so special and so beautiful. And but then there's a few other things that I wanted to talk about. When we had one big trip to California, and we stopped to see Aunt Marnie and her family, and we had the best time in Lake Tahoe. And I'll never forget sitting in Uncle Charlie's car with Beau and Daryl, and listening to Bill Cosby on the radio, and we went to see Journey to the Center of the Earth, and I'll never forget that trip. It was just so special with Beau and Kathy and Daryl, and we just had the best time. And we went out to Disney World, and that was our really big family trip of our whole lives. Later on, we got to do a few plane trips with my dad, but that was it really for our family journeys, except for fishing trips, which we went on all the time. and Nanny used to like to go with us fishing in Bumblewood too, and so a lot of um, our family trips were just little fishing trips around Colorado that were camping trips, and we never stopped at a restaurant. We always had packed our own food, and I never once ate in a restaurant until we went on our trip to California. But where we grew up, we didn't have indoor plumbing until I was 7, and we moved to Grand Junction. Up until that time, I didn't know anybody else who did either, except for Nanny and Bumpa, and of course they lived in a mansion, so we didn't expect much. And until we were older, we had our first store-bought cookies at Nanny's house, our first cereal that wasn't Kellogg's cornflakes at Nanny's house, and she loved buying us treats when later on when she could afford it, and she loved store-bought things because when she was a young mother, nothing was from the store. Everything was made by hand, and you can imagine how hard that was. And we loved churning butter. We loved making ice cream. We loved corn on the cob, and we ate old field corn half the time, and we loved it. We thought it was great, and coming in after feeding the lambs, and Nanny would put on a pot of string beans in the pressure cooker, and she'd cook them all morning long, and by the time they were ready for their hired hands at noontime, they'd be really cooked. And that's how she cooked green beans. I was very old before I realized that green beans actually had texture to them. So, yeah, great times on the farm. I love memories with all our cousins, and we were just blessed to have so much love and family around, and people who cared for you all the time around you. It was the best of times.
Okay, that's beautiful. Well, the farm to me was a destination. I didn't live there, and it was the center of the universe for everybody else. So when I got to go there, it was a big deal. It was really a big deal. That place was like Terra. It was huge. For me, it was a mansion. It was a huge mansion. And the big long lawn that came out from the back porch, and the big cottonwood trees, and that lawn looked like a football field to me. It was that big. So I can remember on many nights, a storm would be coming in, and the sky would turn black, and we'd lay out there, and the wind would start to blow, and those big old trees would rustle. The wind would come through them, and the wind would start blowing everything around, and we'd look up on the monument, and it would just be lightning strike after lightning strike after lightning strike, and it was dramatic. The earth was coming alive in this great, big, beautiful mansion, and so it was very dramatic. And then it was spooky, because down the stairs was the stove, and then there was the pantry where they stored all the canned fruit, and it was lined all the way around with this canned fruit. And I thought that was, I don't know, it was spooky. And then there was 2 bedrooms down there. So when I came to visit, that's where I slept, down in the basement, in those bedrooms. And of course there was lots of stuff stored, family stuff, clothes and old furniture, and it was like a treasure trove down there. It was musty and it was dusty and it smelled like mothballs. So it was like very, very secretive and very cool. And when I came to visit one time, we were living in Reno, and my mom put me on the train. I was 11 years old, and she put me on the train in Susanville, California, on the California Zephyr. And she pinned my name, pinned the destination on my little jacket, said Grand Junction, and she gave the porter $5. And I got on the train in Susanville, California, and rode the train all the way to Colorado. It took about 24 hours. And it was a magical trip up there in the Vista Dome, and I ordered milkshakes from the club car, and it was very, very cool. And I came to visit, and Dennis and I bought cowboy hats, and we went out to play on those old threshing machines, and we spent all summer doing that and spearing frogs. We had some rebar that we just speared the hell out of the frog. What was really pretty cool was the drainage ditch, or the irrigation ditch, came down by the farm, and then there was a cement junction. And at that cement junction, the water was going pretty good, so there would be a little waterfall, maybe about 3 feet high waterfall. Well, underneath it, behind it, was a little grotto. And so we'd get back in that little grotto, and the water would be coming in front of us, and it was very, very humid in there, and pretty loud too because of the water. And it was secretive. I mean, we didn't know who the hell was in there, and we would hide in there for a long time. They couldn't find us, and nobody ever thought, I think, to look in the grotto. So that was pretty cool. And that big long dining room table in there, it was where I first remember men. All the guys had come back from World War II. There was Uncle Darrell and Uncle Manuel and Uncle Benny and Uncle Homer and all these veterans and my father. And they would all sit around after dinner and talk about the war. And all these men full of victory and full of enthusiasm and full of optimism. And all of them went on to do a lot. And I remember looking at those men when I was little, and I thought, these guys are heroes. I listened to those war stories by the hour, and they'd talk by the hour. And Uncle Darrell would smoke and flip his ashes in his Levi cuffs. I thought that was pretty cool because he'd put them in his cuffs and talk. And one winter we came out deer hunting, and Bumpa had these sheep herder wagons. They were kind of like Conestogas in that they had a canvas top over a framework, and they would tow them up there by the cars. And this one winter, we were up at Atchee by the roundhouse up there, and it was all the uncles. And I can remember getting real tired, and this sheep herder wagon, a little wooden wagon, had a bed in there. And so my mom tucked me in the bed, and started snowing. And the men were out there, and a huge bonfire out there. And the snow was a real wet snow, because I can remember the snowflakes hitting the top, the canvas top. And I remember, and it was kind of chilly that night. And I remember I was warm, but my head was outside the blankets, and it was being pretty cold. And I never felt so snug in my life. All those brave men out by the fire talking. I was tucked in the wagon, and I'll never forget that. It was stirring to a young boy to be around all these men. So I guess that's all I remember.
But a lot of times what we would do is we'd sleep out in that orchard. There was apple trees, and Bumpa used to have a dugout where he would put apples to spend the winter, because they would be very good as long as they didn't get too hot or get frozen. And he'd have apples out there all winter, and we'd go out and we'd go down and sleep in that dugout. And then another favorite story is the horse they had, what we called, her name was Molly. And Molly, we'd go up to our house or up to the New Liberty Elementary School. And she was a great horse. But then we'd turn around and he'd come home. And then when she knew that she was coming home, she'd start going faster and faster and faster. Pretty soon, there was no stopping her. And you would go until she got to the corral, and she'd stop on a dime. And the first time I didn't know that, so I went head first off of the horse. And then the next times I knew how to hold on to her neck, and then I just swing around and would be in front of her. But that's what she did every time, and that was a lot of fun. And I remember one year going with Nanny and Bumpa. They would take the grandkids to Denver when they'd go to sell the sheep. And so I remember Retta and I got to go up with them to Denver and got to go to a Litch's Garden, which is had roller coaster, and I can remember that roller coaster like nothing else. And I was probably 10 or 11 at that time. So I just wanted to share some of these special things because it was a wonderful time growing up with Nanny and Bumpa because they really cared. We always got fed well, we got taken care of, we got hugs, and we're loved all the time. And really am thankful to be part of this family. Thank you very much. But a lot of times what we would do is we'd sleep out in that orchard. There was apple trees, and Bumpa used to have a dugout where he would put apples to spend the winter because they would be very good as long as they didn't get too hot or get frozen. And he'd have apples out there all winter, and we'd go out and we'd go down and sleep in that dugout. And then another favorite story is the horse they had. What we called her name was Molly. And Molly, we'd go up to our house or up to the New Liberty Elementary School. And she was a great horse. But then we'd turn around and he'd come home. And then when she knew that she was coming home, she'd start going faster and faster and faster. Pretty soon, there was no stopping her. And you would go until she got to the corral, and she'd stop on a dime. And the first time I didn't know that, so I went head first off of the horse. And then the next times I knew how to hold on to her neck, and then I just swing around and would be in front of her. But that's what she did every time, and that was a lot of fun. Then I remember one year going with Nanny and Bumpa. They would take the grandkids to Denver when they'd go to sell the sheep. And so I remember Retta and I got to go up with them to Denver and got to go to a Litch's Garden, which is had roller coaster, and I can remember that roller coaster like nothing else. And I was probably 10 or 11 at that time. So I just wanted to share some of these special things because it was a wonderful time growing up with Nanny and Bumpa because they really cared. We always got fed well, we got taken care of, we got hugs, and we're loved all the time. And really am thankful to be part of this family. Thank you very much.
Go.
Okay, I grew up on the farm that was by Nanny and Bumpa's. My grandfather, Clyde Likes, owned the farm a mile and a half from Nanny and Bumpa's farm. And my dad and mom moved in there when they got married, and we lived with them, and it was a 4-room house that had 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. We had a pump for the cistern in the sink in the kitchen, and we didn't have any running water or electricity, and we had an outhouse outside. And yes, we did have cars back then because my grandkids asked if we had cars then. And we had an old metal tub that we heated the water on the wood stove and put it in the tub, and we all had a bath in that. Then I would go over to my Nanny and Bumpa's house that seemed like a mansion. It was big, and they had electricity, and they had running water, and they had wood floors, and Nanny had this beautiful hutch that had this china from Denmark in it. And when I was there in the summers, I got to dust it, and that was a big privilege because she trusted me to dust those beautiful dishes. So the first thing I can remember as a little girl at Nanny and Bumpa's house was Christmas. And I'll never forget having snow and all the cousins come over and sing and play cards. We girls played cards a lot. Cindy and Nancy and I played cards a lot together. We played pinochle, and we played fish and just everything. And we played lots of cards. Our family was a card-playing family. And I'll never forget one Christmas Beau and Trudy had their guitars, and I have this picture of this.
where they were singing and they were harmonizing, and Trudy and Cindy could harmonize together, and I always wished I could sing like them. And we had Annie Claire there, and Nanny always had this satin Santa Claus that she would put in the fireplace. She wouldn't let anybody build a fire in the fireplace Christmas Eve because Santa Claus was going to come down that. I was a deep believer in Santa Claus because Santa Claus existed at Nanny's house. And then on Christmas morning, she would put the satin Santa on top of her grand piano, and all of our stockings hung there. And I'll never forget, Bumpa used his work socks to hang on the fireplace. So I wanted to do the same because I loved Bumpa and I wanted to be just like him. So I would hang one of his work socks, and because also it would hold more because it was really long and big. And then one Christmas, Annie Claire, she was a very industrious lady, and she would make things. She'd go to the Goodwill and she'd buy things, and then she'd fix them up. And one year, she bought this little 2-shelf dresser thing, and she painted it all pink and made a little curtain and attached it to this. And I loved to organize things, and so I put that in my bedroom and had my dolls and things in it. And then when I was 8 years old, my family moved away from the farm there in New Liberty and moved to Moab, Utah. And then Dennis and I started spending the summers with Nanny because my mom worked. And summers there were just magical. And my cousins would come and we would play games, and nobody ever worried about where we were. We could be gone all day. We would go to the ditch where it had the little waterfall thing where it shifted to go from our field to somebody else's field. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, we'd go there and we'd slide down that, and we'd play in the water, and we'd ride old Molly to the school, and then Molly would decide that she was ready to go home, and we'd be on her, and she'd just take off as fast as she could go with us poor kids on bareback, and sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 of us on there. And she wanted to go home. And another favorite memory on Nanny and Bumpa's lawn, they had this seemed huge to us kids. It was, seemed like a block long, and it was this wide lawn with these huge cottonwood trees on either side. And we would lay on our backs in the middle of the day and look at the clouds and try and figure out what kinds of animals and whatever the clouds were. And then sometimes we would sleep outside there and look at the stars. It was a free, we just felt such freedom and such safety. I never felt unsafe. And some of the adventures I had there with Bumpa, one time he brought me, I always liked to take care of the little animals. During lambing season, Bumpa would let me take care of the little lambs, and we kept him down by the coal furnace where he had the big coal bin, and I would dry him off with towels, and he even taught me to give them shots, and he taught me to give them bottles, and that's where I learned to have a real interest in medicine. And I just loved dealing with the bum lambs. They were so soft and sweet, and I just felt really great that Bumpa trusted me to take care of those for him. Luckily, I didn't have to go out in the snow and the wind and the cold when they were actually out there lambing as I was younger. And another thing I really loved is I got to feed the chickens. And the chickens, there was a big grain barrel where you got all the grain to feed the chickens. Well, my favorite part of that was I loved the sorghum barrel. There was a big 50-gallon drum of sorghum molasses. And to this day, I love molasses. And I would go out there and just dip my finger in over and over and over in that sorghum molasses, and I just love blackstrap molasses to this day. I also learned to make pies. Nanny taught me to make pies, and to this day I love to make pies. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas, sometimes I make as many as 15 pies. I love to make pies. The fun things with the cousins, we love to ride Molly. We've got lots of pictures of that with sometimes 6 of us on there. The house was just all kinds of places, magical places to look. I remember one time discovering this little wooden tea, or I guess it was a wine thing, that if you lifted up the top of it, it would come up at like a shelf, and there was a wine decanter and wine glasses, And I thought I had discovered something that nobody else knew was there. And I don't know who inherited that one. Nanny passed away, but that was just really fun. And then Nanny also had a card shuffler that I just thought was the coolest thing ever. And we'd use that all the time when we played cards. Every summer, Nanny would, when I got there to spend the time with her, she would have this huge stack of ironing. She saved all the ironing for me. I was her little ironing girl. And she always made sure I had work to do. I would iron handkerchiefs, tablecloths, pillowcases, sheets, and just everything that I don't know why she had so many that she could save it all winter long for me, but she did, and I did all the ironing and cleaning. I loved to clean with her and loved to can. The neighbors would all get together and can peaches every fall, and I never forget a bunch of the old farmer ladies coming over, and we were in Nanny and Bumpa's mudroom. Right as you came in the back stairs, there was a mudroom, and we were washing peaches and getting ready to peel them. And that was a really community spirit that we had there. Another fun memory I have, we had a family get together, and there was a big cistern that had a big cement top, and in the summer it was always the boys' job to go down and get the dead mice and everything out of it. And then we had hollyhocks all around it, and to this day I love hollyhocks. And we girls would take the hollyhocks and make skirts out of them. And we girls would play, the hollyhocks were princesses, and we would take the ones that were fully bloomed, and then we would take the buds, and we'd put a little hole in the top, in the bottom of the bloomed one, and stick the little bud on there, and that was little dancing princesses. And to this day I love hollyhocks still. And Nanny had these peace roses that she raised. They were so beautiful. Another really stark memory I have is we were there one summer, and there was a huge hailstorm, and we all ran in the house, but we were watching out the windows. Nanny wouldn't let us next to the windows, but they were golf ball size hail, and they totally destroyed all the fruit off of all the trees in the orchard, and broke some of the windows there by the fireplace. And in the 2 summers, when I was 10 and when I was 11, I had Osgood-Schlatter disease, and I had casts from my hip to my ankle. And Nanny had this beautiful, rich, maroon red velvet couch, and I sat on it with those casts and totally wore holes in them from my casts rubbing on them. But nothing would stop me from riding the horse, and so I would ride the horse, and I'd have my legs out, straight out on either side of her spine, because they were stiff. And I would go down to the pond and play in the pond and catch frogs and pollywogs and stuff, but I'd just lay on my belly. And one year Kathy helped me construct a wood raft thing that I could lay on and do that. My most favorite memories of Nanny and Bumpa's farm were Nanny and Bumpa. And Bumpa would get up like 3 in the morning and go out and work really, really hard and come in we had dinner at noontime, and then he would take a nap. And I always I was really hyper, but when Bumpa was there, I'd love to sit on his lap and just relax. He would go sound asleep, but it was just a real comforting thing to me to be with him like that. And good.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.